this come? What? Can you all see the screen okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, and if you could go ahead and put yourself on mute and we will get started. So welcome everybody. I'm glad so many of you could be here tonight. We might have mentioned that these two modules, I should say, are pretty important modules in that they really kind of talk about the nuts and bolts of communicating with clients. So we'll talk about it a little bit more at the end of the webinar, but your module tasks in these two modules are going to give you a little bit of experience in seeing how you would help somebody. So for the next 2 weeks, you won't need to do an interview. I know I hear the cheers already, but let's go ahead and get started. And like I said, we'll share more about that when we're at the end of the webinar.
You're
So
not off the hook for a module task, though.
what's that?
They're not off the hook for a module task,
That's
though.
correct. That is correct. You are going to have to do the module task, but you're not going to have to interview somebody to do it. So, as I said, we're going to be talking about communication, and good communications are not just necessary, it's essential. Effective communication with your clients helps to foster a good working relationship. It's so important because without that good working relationship, both you and your client start getting frustrated. You don't get anywhere, they may stop working with you. Now, at the same time, remember that if somebody stops working with you, if they only go to one group or one session, it may simply mean that they don't want to continue to pay for a group or a session, or maybe you're not a good fit and they need to go elsewhere. Now, if that happens because of poor communication skills, that's something that needs to be worked on, but it may just happen for other reasons as well. This webinar provides a great deal of information on communication as you move forward to help grieving pet parents. So what are our goals for tonight? First, we want to talk about what is it exactly? What are some of the tasks that you'll be doing as a pet loss specialist? You need to know what's expected of you so you can be sure that you're comfortable doing this work. We are going to talk about some useful theories in supporting clients. Now, this is what we call the really heavy section, but it's very important to help you determine what fits with your helping style. There are some methodologies that I don't use, but it's important to at least understand them. And then lastly, we'll talk about some basic communication skills for working with clients. For some of you, this may be a review, but it's always good to review, right? And remind ourselves that we're doing our best for ourselves and our clients as well. What this looks okay. So like I said, let's start out talking about what are some of our roles as a pet loss specialist. Obviously, you'll be offering guidance to pet parents, but it will be in their most vulnerable state. Your strong sense of compassion, your commitment to helping them, that's the most important qualities. By walking the grief journey with your clients, you help them make informed, healthy decisions so as they can begin to learn to live without their beloved pets. As I said, we're going to be talking about 5 or 6 of these roles that you will be doing as you help your clients. The first one is providing a safe environment for clients to share. And if you remember, one of the characteristics we talked about that makes pet loss so challenging is it really is a very disenfranchised type of loss. Many people don't understand the depth of the relationship that pet parents share with their pets. That's what makes losing them so much harder. Because not only are we grieving, but we have to be really wary of who we can talk to, who we can trust at this time, who we can talk to about our feelings. That's the importance of creating a safe environment where you have your clients feel like they can share with you and with others if it's a group. Now, how do you create that safe environment? Well, we're going to talk about a few things that you can do. Part of it, though, comes as you develop your relationship and having individual sessions with them. Part of it can happen in a group. Just giving people group guidelines, something so that they can feel safe with. They know what's going to happen. They can understand how it might help them. And like I said, we'll talk about a couple of other things that provides a safe environment in the next slide or two. Part of it is bearing witness to grief. I always say that being a pet loss specialist is kind of like being that safe vessel where clients can share whatever they need to without feeling that their sadness, their guilt, their blame is misunderstood. It's doing what we mentioned several times before, and I'm going to mention several more times going through, but really listening to what your client is sharing, making them feel safe and okay about having those feelings, whatever they are. Let them share those feelings without worry. One of the greatest benefits is that the more they can share what they need to, the intensity of those feelings begin to diminish. It begins to get less and less and less scary. Again, all that comes back to creating that safe environment for them. A really big part of it, validating your client's losses, right? Because as we said, they often are not validated outside. I think I might have mentioned to you that for me, what I feel like I do best is I'm able to kind of, when I work with my clients, I let go of that pet loss specialist title and I become that pet mom who really gets what it's like to lose a pet. That in itself helps them know I get it. I'm not looking to teach them. I'm just looking to be there, to be that safe vessel, someone who gets it, someone who's willing to listen, someone who's willing to understand. As we've mentioned, I believe in the group call and the last webinar, you are going to hear a lot of things. You are going to hear people say, am I crazy? What's wrong with me? Why am I feeling this upset? Our job is to let them know nothing's wrong with them. They're grieving. It's all part of the process. That's what validating is all about. Listening, letting them know their feelings are common, normal, understandable. We'll talk more about that later too. Using our own words and experiences to help them validate what's in their minds and what's in their hearts, to let them know that they are not alone. What words am I talking about? Doesn't have to be really complicated. Something like, I am so sorry, or I get that. Phrases that let clients feel understood, that let them feel accepted. We talked about this a little bit in our first module, but it can be very difficult to be non-judgmental. You're going to hear these stories. I mean, we don't want to freak you out, but you are going to hear things that are very distressing, extremely sad, and you may even at times say, how could you let that happen? How could you not see that? Obviously, we never want to share those feelings with our clients. As a pet loss specialist, it's not your job to share those thoughts. It's your job to be able to kind of absorb them. Otherwise, your client starts getting defensive, angry, guilty, so on. They're probably thinking the exact same thing you are and beating themselves up for it as well. It also includes being mindful, as we said, of your facial expressions, your body language. You have to listen, talk less, listen more. We've said that before too. We'll say it many times again. It's very, very important that you talk less and you listen more. Allow your clients to put everything out there on the table, to let them know it is that safe space. They have to know that you're not going to judge them. Again, obviously, we want to communicate with them in a compassionate manner. It shows that you have that genuine desire to understand and get to know that person. When you communicate with compassion, people know that you're sincere, that you can be trusted. Again, simple words. I'm so sorry. That had to be horrible. He was so beautiful is very appropriate. Shedding a tear is also okay. Obviously, we have to remain professional, but it does help us build that relationship. We talked a little bit about this too, staying self-aware. You might be triggered by what you hear. They may bring up memories of your own grief experiences. That could be really difficult. It's critical that you find time to check in with yourself and work through those feelings. In some of the modules that we've done, particularly module 5, where we asked you to really kind of dig into some of your own grief, you may have shared a story with us and kind of realized how much it's still there. We encourage you to work through it. You may want to set up a session with any one of us. You may want to join one of our support groups or one of our chat rooms. If you need to do that, let us know. Also, we need to stay aware of our own prejudices. We have to stay aware of how our client is reacting to us. If we're having a hard time getting through to them, it may be time to reassess, is what I'm doing working? That's where we talk about this idea of really being flexible. And we have talked about one of the challenging things of pet loss is that you're never going to find two people that are going to go through the loss in the same way, even if they've lost the same pet. Now, there are definitely some skills we're going to teach you that will give you coping strategies, will let you help your clients. But you are going to run across what we may call more challenging clients, where you're going to have to be more flexible. You're going to have to be more creative. That's where the flexibility comes in. It really is about working without expectations, working with even some vulnerability, to be able to say to yourself, I'm not sure this is working. What do I have to do to be able to get through to that person? Maybe talking to a self-care buddy who's also in the field. We do that. And also to think that nothing is wrong with you for struggling to find a way to work with them. Nothing's wrong with your client either. I think that part, at least for me, is that we have to be always learning. There's always more to learn. There's more articles, there's more books. It does not have to be only about pet loss. There are some really good books out there that teach you about grief, and it can be applied to pet loss. There's different articles out there. It doesn't have to be all original, all about you. And that's where we get to this idea about providing pet loss resources. You don't always have to have all the answers. We don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. Again, there are good books that we can share with our clients. There are good articles, and it is our job to share that information with them. With my individual group clients, my group clients, every one of them gets a bibliography. They get a coping strategies. People that come to our chats too, they get an article about guilt. When I did my groups in person, they also have something they read and fill out, which are the group guidelines. I don't use them as much, but I still have them. I had rack cards done that are on different titles like seniors and pet loss, children and pet loss, um, pet loss and guilt. There's that really good article on guilt that I always give to my clients if they're going through anticipatory bereavement. I tell them about the pledge from the heart. I tell them about the quality of life scale. A lot of times, to providing them something in writing that they can hold on to, that they can read, it's something more tangible. And when they're in that grief fog, it's nice to have something in writing, something you can refer to, something that you can go back to on those days and times. If you're really struggling at night, I often tell my clients that's a really good time maybe to do some reading. It's something that they have that they can rely on. So we're going to talk about some useful theories of support, kind of like we shared some theories of grief in the first webinar. But before we do that, I just want to jump off for a second and see, does anybody have any questions about anything that we shared? Or, when you think about being flexible, validating clients' losses, providing that safe space. Is there anything that you think you may struggle with? Is there anything you do best? Any clients, any comments or questions? You can speak out, raise your hand, use that little emoji thing, put it in the chat box if you don't feel like talking.
I know a lot, most of the papers that we grade on that first module, what do you think you'd have, so you'd struggle with? And almost everyone says, remaining non-judgmental. It's so hard.
It
It's
is
really
so
hard.
hard.
See, can we get a transcript of your talk?
Well, I don't really have a transcript of it. I mean,
Yeah,
I have
this is,
little
yeah.
notes. So you have the study guide, you have you'll have the recording. I will ask again that if you want to use it verbatim, that you do give us credit for it. But I don't really have like again, I have my little notes, so I remember little things to say, but then I'm using the same study guide that you are. Anything else?
Hi, I have something to say. So about being non-judgmental. So coaching, I'm a certified coach, ACC ICF certified coach. And in the land of coaching, the minute you become judgmental, your session is technically over. So the minute your opinion comes into play, the minute you start judging them, the minute another thought that enters your mind about what you think about what your client is saying, you're done. And a good way to combat that I've learned with clients, if anybody cares, which you really don't have to, I get it. The minute that comes into your mind, you failed. So that's really a good yardstick. It's a good way to replace that thought. Is if you find that happening, you can ring it in your head like, this is not right. This is me failing my client. I found it to be very helpful when I was learning how to do that.
Yeah, and that is one way. I don't like to use so much the
Failure
word
is not it's a negative word. I understand what you're saying. I'm just speaking in regards to figuring out how to navigate when your opinion comes into play. That's all. You can replace that with any word you want. That's very positive. I hear you and agree.
Yeah, and I think we are going to talk about in this module Alan Wolfeld's work. And he really gives you some, I don't know if you've ever heard of companioning. We're going to talk about it in a little bit, but that really helps too. So I think that'll be an important part. Anything else? Connie, do you see anything there? I think you're on mute, Connie.
Lynn, if you didn't get the email, how did you get into the Zoom? Because
I used the Zoom information from the first week,
oh,
but I did not receive an email today with any of this information.
Huh.
okay, let me look and I'll yeah, because we've
I
been
sent it
have
out.
you
You
got
got it, right?
yeah, you're on the yeah, LSEHNERT@mac.com.
Yes, I usually get the emails, but I didn't receive today's email.
Okay.
Interesting. I can try to forward it to you again.
Yeah, or you may want to check your email address too. I mean, sometimes we've had people find out that they're using an email and it may be full or something, so just a thought as well.
Or your spam. If you've been
Yeah.
getting that.
I checked everything.
That's weird.
Huh, okay. All right, well, we'll go ahead and go on, and then yeah, Connie, if you wanna
Yeah, I'll forward it. Okay, Lynn, I just resent it.
okay. All right, so like we said, this is our webinar alert. This is a bit information dense, this next section. A lot of information we're going to be sharing with you. It's all very useful. It's all very pertinent. If you remember in the first webinar we went through different theories of understanding grief. There are also different theories or frameworks to help you understand how to support your clients. We really believe it's important to have a basic understanding of these so that you can be flexible. You're going to want to have the greatest amount of tools in we call it a grief toolbox. And again, what we're doing here, just as we did when we talked about the theories of grief, is really just to provide you with an overview. If there's a theory you're interested in, there are many good books where you could learn more about it. There's webinars sometimes. Most likely you are going to be drawn to one theory. But as we say over and over, what fits for one may not fit for another. So that's why it's good to have this information as well. So you can figure out what works for you. Come on. Whoopsie. Okay, so we're going to be talking about companioning, cognitive behavior therapy, EMDR, and then really what we call the integrative approach, which is kind of finding your way, because having that well-rounded background of theories does help you come up and know what to do and when. You may realize too that you may not be the best person for that client. You're going to need to know when to refer to somebody. For example, you see that third one there, EMDR. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a type of psychotherapy. We're going to go into it in more detail in the future, but lots of times when you have clients who are experiencing PTSD-like symptoms, maybe they witnessed, the death of their dog or cat, and it was somewhat traumatic. I'm not trained in EMDR. I have colleagues who have years of experience in EMDR therapy. So what happens if I find a client who I feel needs it, I'm going to refer them. A lot of times that's how I have actually gotten clients too, because I work with different therapists and I may refer somebody to them, and if they don't do a lot of pet loss, I have a therapist that I work with that she's not a pet owner, and she always feels like she can't offer as much to a client dealing with pet loss as I may be able to. And we'll talk more about that at the very end when we talk about marketing and developing relationships. But it's important to at least understand what it is, to know when somebody may need that, so that you can refer somebody. We're going to start out, and I mentioned it a little bit, about companioning. Companioning is something that I have found to be very, very useful. It's what I actually use the most, because it really is about being non-judgmental, about listening, and about learning. When I explain companioning to people, I say I'm not dragging the client down that grief road. Instead, I'm walking alongside them. I'm listening and I'm caring. Companioning's about being totally present to the mourner, sorry. You are going to learn from your client. You're actually going to observe your client. They actually give you some answers that you need to help them. They may not realize it, but because you are paying such attention to them, you do get those answers. In companioning, you do provide that safe space so they can embrace those feelings. You could be totally present to them and to their pain. Companioning is not the same as counseling. It's a little bit different, and you see this on the slide here and the next one as well. It really is about learning and not teaching. It's about walking alongside them, listening with your heart. You're not analyzing anything. You're just feeling. You're being there with them. With companioning, there is no reward for speed. That is something that Dr. Wolfelt says all the time. You're sitting, you're listening. There may be times of sacred silence. Sometimes there's no need for words. Sometimes people just need that place where they could be sad, where they can cry with no judgment. With companioning, that's what you offer. Remember, even in pet loss, you are never going to fix anybody. You are never going to take away their grief. You're going to help them be able to deal with the grief, but you're also going to allow them that space to feel the grief. You want to help people feel from their loss. You give them tools, you give them coping strategies, but you realize that this is their journey, not yours. And so you're not really judging it at all. With companioning, again, this is what I'm saying, you don't take away the pain. You don't fix them. You're not responsible for their pain. You're present to their pain by bearing witness. That's what we were talking about. You allow them to be in pain. This theory and methodology is very different than a lot of counseling and coaching methods, but it really makes so much sense to me. Again, I've been doing, this is year 16 for me, and I feel like it's a theory that connects with pet loss the most. As Dr. Wolfelt says, companioning acknowledges that grief forever changes and transforms the mourner's worldview. Think about it. Think about the pets that you have personally lost. I mean, when you think about them, sure, you can remember more of the joy, but there still may be some of the pain there. It doesn't go away, but you learn to embrace it. You learn to live with it. I will forever miss Maz and Callie and all my other pets. I always will. There are times when that pain is stronger than other times. There are times when I still feel a little guilt. It's worse than at other times. I've learned to accept it, though. It's part of the grief. By acknowledging those feelings, I'm able to allow them to come in and let them go. By accepting that it's part of grief, I'm able to live a good life and love again. That's how I have my two little nudniks here. I highly recommend Dr. Wolfelt's book. Some of our students and I have taken some of his courses. His primary book, which is really the overview of his theory, is called Companioning the Bereaved. It really is excellent. You can find more information for it. It's Connie, I forgot to write that down. What is his website? www.
Oh, Center for Loss and Life Transition, I think. I'll
Yeah.
find it in yeah, Center for Loss and Life Transition. I'll put it in the chat. Yeah, it's a really good site.
Yeah, there's a lot of good resources there too.
Yeah, there
So,
is.
you know, and I think we've talked about this. Connie and I kind of I'll use the term grew up maybe with a very different grief support modality, I'll say, where it's like, yeah, you know, you let people talk about the loss and then you fix them kind of, you know, and after a while it should be fixed. And that never felt good for me. I don't think it felt good for a lot of us who work together now. The more you do this work, I mean, Connie, don't you agree that it just really fits with it?
Definitely. Yeah, because when someone is mourning, they don't need counseling, they need someone to sit with them in their grief and listen to them because they're not getting that anywhere else. And yeah, I think it's made for bereavement counseling.
Yeah. So now that we've totally promoted it, we should get a little commission or something.
Right?
We are going to talk about a couple of other ideas. One of them is cognitive behavior therapy. And as much as I align with Dr. Wolfelt's work, I know that when I lost Maz, I was in a really deep grief fog. I have a lot of my clients who are in a really deep grief fog. There are also people who are more cognitive in their grief. They are the thinkers. They need to know the hows, the whys. And so for them, more is needed. So for me, for instance, I really struggle to get out of bed and to function. So that theory of cognitive behavior would have helped me had I known about it at the time. And it is a good model. Before we go into how it can be used in grief, though, I just want to describe a little bit about it. It was actually developed by Albert Ellis in the 50s. Aaron Beck added more to it in the 60s. But it's based on the idea that what we think affects how we feel, which is our emotions, and also how we act, which is our behaviors, and that they do all interact together. So our thoughts determine our feelings, and our feelings can determine our behaviors. So if we change our thoughts, we can change our emotions, we can change our behaviors. So how does this all fit in with grief then? Well, I'll talk a little bit about that here. For thinkers, for people in a deep grief fog, it provides a framework. It's somewhat of a structure that in a way you can hold on to for support because it offers more strategies for healing. Because thoughts affect feelings, which affect actions. Think about that. Thoughts affect feelings and they affect actions. So let's say you had somebody like me who starts out saying, you know what? It's never going to get better. Never going to feel better. What does that do for me? Well, that's only going to make me feel really sad. And what happens then? Maybe I'll just stop wanting to get out of bed. That's because nothing really matters. I may wind up getting sick. There's a lot of research that shows us that our immune system gets affected by grief. But what if I were going to look at that a little differently? What if I were to say, well, you know, the other people in the group are healing, so maybe I can too? What does that do for me? Gives me a little bit of hope, right? If I see other people and they're doing a little bit better, they're not crying as much, they're able to talk about their emotions a little easier. What does it do for me? Maybe if I'm not as sad, I'll take better care of myself. I will care about what I look like. I will believe that maybe things could get better. That's how it can really begin to help people with healing from grief. Now, it's important to know that cognitive behavior theory, and this is kind of like hint, 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 hint. I'll just say that when you're doing your quiz. Unless you are a therapist who's trained in cognitive behavior therapy, you can't really do it. What you can do, though, is a little part of it, which is called cognitive reframing. Cognitive reframing is used in a lot of different areas, but basically, it's almost like that STOP method that we talked about. It's looking at a difficult image from a different angle. We've used that, as I said, with the STOP method. We've talked about it with anger and guilt. It's rather than thinking about everything we did wrong as a pet parent, maybe we can make a list of the things we did right. I might have mentioned this. For me, I was really stuck on Maz having seizures on that last drive to the vet. It was working to let go of that emotion and thinking about all his favorite things, all the good things we did together, all the loving things we did together. That being said, it does not happen overnight. It takes work to do that. What do I mean work? It takes practice. It means getting to a point where you're stopping yourself. And every time that a feeling starts happening, Sometimes you even need to say that stop, right? Like the lady who ran the group suggested I put a rubber band around my wrist. And every time I started going back to that last ride and how horrible a pet mom I was, I gently kind of snapped it. I mean, you don't want to really hurt yourself, right? And then I kind of changed that thought. As I said, though, cognitive reframing is just a piece of cognitive behavior therapy. There's a lot of training, a lot of people do, and they could do a lot more with it. But this cognitive reframing thing is definitely something you can work with your clients. So we've talked about this a little bit too. Actually, in Module 4, we talked about pet loss related to tragic accidents. At that point, you may be dealing with something more. You might be dealing with traumatic loss. Traumatic loss can lead to PTSD if it's not dealt with. And there may be some people who just don't go through a traumatic loss, but it really affects every part of their life, their behaviors. They really struggle with some of those PTSD symptoms. You've probably heard about PTSD with our war veterans, right? Where they're thrown into difficult situations. They see difficult things. Those images really can stay with them. They can intrude into every part of their lives to a point where you can't release them. Some of the more common symptoms of PTSD: sleep disorders, nightmares, difficulty socializing, difficulty functioning, getting up and getting ready for the day, like I was talking about. So similarly, when a pet parent witnesses a traumatic passing, maybe their pet being hit by a car or a difficult accident at home. One of my colleagues is the lead in working with the Red Cross, where there are all these fires, and that could be very traumatic to witness. A lot of those clients deal with PTSD symptoms. There are strategies we can try to help our clients with that. But we also have to remember probably one of the most important phrases in this whole class, which is do no harm. You've got to be able to say, I don't know how to help this person. And if you can't, that's where you may want to do a referral to a therapist, maybe a therapist who is certified and trained in EMDR therapy. So let's talk about PTSD and EMDR therapy for a bit. The really good thing about it, like I said, is these are specialist therapists that get trained in EMDR therapy. It takes a lot of training. It actually is a pretty intense modality to use. It is very effective. EMDR, again, stands for eye movement desensitization and reprogramming. It's way too complicated to go into a lot of details here, but there are many articles that, if you're interested, basically it uses a technique called bilateral stimulation. So in EMDR therapy, it's believed that these symptoms affect your physical being. So the therapist tries to guide the client through a series of eye motions. And it's kind of like moving that memory to a more functional part of the brain. I have seen it work with so many of my clients. Had a young client, and I think actually this is the first time I referred out to an EMDR therapist. I was living in LA at the time. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the freeways, but he had his very first dog he was driving with, and It was kind of before they said, don't ride with the windows wide open, or there weren't any kind of harnesses to secure your dog. And unfortunately, the dog did jump out the window and was hit. He did bring it to a vet, but the dog had to be euthanized. And it was his first loss. And he was just traumatized. He and his mom came to a group, and she actually did most of the talking that first group. And I wound up talking to both of them after the group, and kind of knew that that's what he was going to need. Now, here's the thing. He did continue to come to the group along with working with this therapist. That can happen. My suggestion in terms of if you find yourself needing an EMDR specialist, you can go on to a site like Psychology Today, and there's a place where it says search therapies. You could put in your zip code, you could put in EMDR therapy. Again, we will talk about developing relationships with other professionals in the bonus module, the marketing module. But it's good to have one or two people that you could refer to, because you invariably are going to meet somebody somewhere along the line. The more you do this work, that will need this type of therapy. So we've talked about companioning, obviously, we're big fans of that. Talked about cognitive behavior therapy, and now about EMDR therapy. But it really is about finding a way to integrate them, right? Now that your brain's all full, how do you begin to do that? And again, grief is never linear, it's never cut and dry. Every client is different. Every client's experience is different. So using an integrative or multidimensional approach allows us the widest variety of tools to help our clients. It's not a cookie cutter job. It may be, you may have two people who lost the same pet, and one does really well with companioning. One may need a little bit more in terms of cognitive reframing. Maybe there's some part of it they're struggling with. They may need a little bit more, even with CBT, where you may have to refer them out. No method is better than another. You need to find what you're comfortable with. I will tell you, most of the people I know in this field do kind of work a lot with companioning because of the way it does fit. The basic thing is to have an idea of what these things are, study, learn, do what's best for your client, and please, please, please always remember, do no harm. Your job is to help them, and sometimes the best way you can help them is by saying, I'm not sure I have the tools to help you, but I have a great person I would love to refer you to that I know will be able to help you. I know too that was a lot of information, so I'm gonna stop the share and just ask again. You can kind of yell out or raise your hand or use the icon, or if you don't want to talk to us in the chat box. But does anybody have any questions about these? Any thoughts about using them? Did we just give you all a headache?
I think they're in shock.
I know. It always happens in this section,
I know,
unfortunately.
they're just kind of they're just kind of dazed.
Huh? What?
Well, and Sandy and I were both trained by someone who was really, really heavy into cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
And um, he you know, for someone who almost founded, you know, pet loss
Yeah.
bereavement, you know, counseling, essentially, um, he could be the most, what's the word, stern, or, you know,
Yeah.
he just wanted to hurry the people along in their grief, you know. And he always warned us of doing the warm fuzzies. Remember that? The warm fuzzies, you know, and which is fine. You know, we do the warm fuzzies right at the beginning because that's what people need. And but man, if they weren't making any progress, like in our chat rooms, he'd boot them out of the chat rooms. And we're like, okay. But that goes to show you how far this field has come in those years, because that was many years ago. And so and I think to the betterment of the entire field.
Yeah, you know, I mean, again, he was doing this, what, even was it in the 80s he started it?
It was, yeah.
Is there anything in chat there? Or?
Yeah, Nikki knows who it is. Yeah, he was stern. Yes, he was stern is putting it lightly. Yeah, he was stern.
You
He
know,
actually, for a while there, I helped him teach his class. And I did the cognitive behavioral therapy portion of the in-person class, and that didn't last very long because I guess I wasn't stern enough. But it,
yeah.
it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, and listen, you know, we always say bless his heart because he really was a founder in the field.
Well,
But
Freud
it was
started
a very
you know, you got to start somewhere, right? You got
yeah.
to start somewhere. And so, yeah, it was a good,
Nikki
it was
wanted to
a good.
add something.
Yes, not about the teacher and his little dog,
And his
right?
That's
little dog, yes.
right.
But that gratitude is a really nice place to start reframing. And I've just found, I mean, I'm a counselor also, but even without the counseling background, that to almost like kind of redirect people sometimes to thinking about what you were grateful for with
Yeah,
your pet
Yeah.
can
yeah,
be it really can be very it's subtle, but it can be very, very helpful for people. So I just wanted to throw that out, that and there are some wonderful there's a great YouTube on gratitude. It's so heartwarming, from a man who just talks about the power of gratitude. It's like 7.5 minutes, and I can put it in the chat if you want.
Yeah.
yeah. Put it in the chat because
Yeah,
that would be a nice resource to
yeah,
send clients.
yeah.
Yeah, and there's some nice gratitude journals out there, and we even talk
Yes.
about, you know, a gratitude jar. You know, write down every day, write down one thing you're thankful for, and you know, it doesn't have to be much at
Yeah,
all.
and you know, the one thing I will say about gratitude is on the opposite side of it is like I have had clients where you have to be careful because in the beginning, until they really get those rough spots out, it's
Mm.
like hard for them to think of anything to be
Yeah,
grateful.
yeah, yeah. In the first session, first couple, you know, no. But
Yeah.
because you got to get that grief out of you. But yeah, later on, we definitely talk about
Yeah, you know what? Like, and I always, I think the other day or something, we were talking about they need to say how horrible they are, you know?
yeah, yeah.
And I think that's where we'll talk. Was there some?
Someone's not on mute. There's
Oh,
some.
that's me. Sorry.
Oh,
That's okay. Um, yeah, I think that's where next week when we talk a little bit more about support groups, um, I think one of the benefits of them is that, you know, so you're in a support group and you're able to tell others, you know, God, you are a wonderful mom. And they kind of say that to you, but in the beginning, it's hard for you to believe that, you know. So maybe, like, you know, sometimes hearing it, like another participant say, you did do everything you could have. I mean, Connie, don't you find that too?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I get everybody coming up to me because how do they know it's 1 minute till dinner time? Are you hungry? You're hungry.
All right. Well, the good part is we're kind of at the last part of the webinar
Yeah,
now.
the good part for them is daddy feeds them on the
Oh,
days I can't, and he's trying to make them fat.
no. Okay. Well, let's get back to this last section here. There we go. There we go. Okay. Why does this always do it when I step? There we go. So as we said before, part of this module, we're going to talk about some basic communication skills, which is very important, obviously, as a pet loss specialist. It can't be underestimated, honestly. It really is imperative. It helps you build that relationship. It allows you to help your clients travel down that grief journey. So you really want to be able to find a way to connect and communicate with your clients really well. Again, even though we tell you to listen more and talk less, you obviously need to talk, right? But it's important to realize too that what you say, how you say it, cannot be undone. So it's a huge important factor to think about what you're saying. I am a big proponent of therapy. I've been in therapy. I encourage it for others, but I want to share a story with you. I had a client come to my group who experienced having their dog taken by a coyote right in front of them. It was actually kind of like a support dog. This little dog went everywhere with her. And she was seeing this therapist for like 7 or 8 years, and she would bring the dog to the therapy sessions. Well, when she got back and she told the therapist at the next session what had happened, how hard a time she was having with what had happened, one of the first things the therapist said to her is, I know, but I really want you to focus on happier thoughts. That's a perfect example. I'm not putting down therapists at all. Okay, probably was not a real animal lover, you know, but it's that true, but not very helpful. It's one of Dr. Wolfeld's favorite phrases. That's why what you say, how you say, is so important. Words are like toothpaste, you know, once it's out of the tube, you can't put it back, right? Think before speaking. It's okay to have that silent moment where you put your thoughts together. You always want to give credibility to the client by letting them know that the grief they're feeling and experiencing is normal. Most of my clients wonder about that because, again, they're surrounded by people who say really insensitive things like, you know, it's been a few weeks. I mean, it's really starting to time where you're over this now. Clients need to feel that their feelings are normal. You are going to find yourself wanting to fix them and help them and share your personal story. It's okay if it's appropriate. Remember, keep it short and keep it about them. It's not about you, it's about them. So, a big part of communicating with clients is not just to speak, but that ability to truly listen. It's often said that while we're hearing the words people are sharing with us, we may not actually be paying attention to them or to the feelings behind the words. That's where active listening comes in. And look, active listening is not only important in helping grieving clients, I think it's important in day-to-day interactions with each other. Active listening is really about being present to what your client is saying, not just the words, the meaning behind the words. Now, if you look at that chart, there's about 10 different kind of concepts, ideas behind active listening. We're only going to talk about a few of them. And again, just as a hint for your quiz and more importantly, your module task, we want you to focus in on the methodology or the ideas, the concepts that we teach you about. Not that it's the only ones, but we just want you to focus in on these because it's the ones that you're going to use the most often. So let's talk about some of the verbal active communicate or active listening techniques. And you see the first one there, which is paraphrasing, and sometimes it's called clarifying. Really, it allows you to show your client that you're paying attention to them by asking questions to confirm the intent. And way of doing that is, so what I hear you saying, John, is, and then you repeat back, not exactly in the words you used, but in your interpretation or understanding of it. To be sure, number one, it's showing him that you're listening, but it's also showing him that you're getting what he's saying, and also that he's communicating it right to you. The second one here, minimal encouragers. We're gonna like highlight, underline, circle that word minimal because that's the key part of it. It's short, subtle, verbal exchanges which encourage your client to share more. Things like, for instance, or can you share more on that? Or that's really interesting. Can you give me an example of that? You're not really asking a question. You're trying to get them to share more about what they're thinking, what they're feeling. So again, just short little phrases like that. Now, these are a couple of verbal active listening techniques, but there are also nonverbal active listening techniques. And we kind of talked about this a little bit when we were talking about being non-judgmental. It's how we react. And it really, again, does require us to be mindful. Now, I will tell you, especially before I started doing this work, I really was one of those people who, if somebody said something or I heard something, you could see it all over my face that it upset me. I really had to work on that in doing this work. And so part of it was standing in front of a mirror and watching yourself on how you react. You know, so when you're thinking, oh my God, what's wrong with you? You don't want that to show on your face. There's things like we call attending or observant body language, right? We want open body. You don't want to sit there with your legs folded, your arms folded. You want to direct eye contact. Every now and then, an affirmative head nod is something that could be helpful. It can help them want to continue on. You want to avoid what Dr. Wolfelt talks about, like the bobblehead doll effect, right? So you don't want to sit there the whole time shaking your head because it starts to lose its impact. non-judgmental facial expressions. I'll add about tears. Again, if something really affects you, there's nothing wrong with allowing a tear to well up in your eye, to roll down your cheek. It can help in the connection. Obviously, we have to stay professional about it. Really important, touch. A gentle touch of an arm or shoulder during a tense or anxious time can mean more than words can. That being said, you don't want to do something like that old tap on the back, like there. That's very dismissive. Okay. If you want to give somebody a hug, always ask them if it's okay if you give them a hug. Sometimes people may be uncomfortable with that. And you know what? That's okay. Again, it's really about them, not about you. There are a couple of techniques, verbal techniques, that are not really in the realm of active listening, but are so important, and you're going to use them a lot. And it's these two. It's normalizing, which is really just giving credibility to your client's thoughts, their feelings, their behaviors and experiences, by letting them know that their responses are normal. Here's one here. John, it's so understandable you feel this loss is harder than any you felt before. The relationship you had with Fluffy was very, very special. And I will tell you, and I think Connie could probably agree with me, you are going to get a lot of people who will say, you know, I lost my mom, I lost my dad, I lost my brother, my sister, my grandparent, my cousin. This loss is harder. I'm having a harder time with it. Hear that a lot. That's why it's important to let them know that, yeah, it's understandable. You know, I had this one client who was this elderly woman, and she had lost her husband maybe like 4 or 5 years before. And her daughter, one time she was crying and talking about she lost her cat, was saying, like, or her dog, I'm sorry. And she was saying, you know, Mom, you know, you didn't really cry this hard for Dad. And the mom said to her, yeah, but your dad didn't come running up to me every time I walked in the house, kind of hugging me and so happy that I'm here. You know, so it can be true. The other one here is self-disclosure. And that's where we talked about it is, if you have something that happened to you that is very, very similar that happened to your client, there's nothing wrong with sharing it as long as, number one, it's appropriate and would be helpful, but keep it short. Make sure the focus stays on your client and not on you. Something like, no, I can relate to your pain, Joan. I remember how painful it was when I got that cancer diagnosis with Scotty. Now, if Joan then says, well, you know, did you have somebody to share it with or ask you a question? Sure, you can answer that question. But again, the focus, answer the question, and then, you know, you may want to say something like, is there anyone you have that you felt like you could share it with? Or what's the hardest part for you? Again, bring it back to your client. So again, we have this final thought. And again, we just want you to understand that as you begin to help your clients, don't think you're ever going to take away their pain, because you're not. You can walk with them on this journey with an open heart, open ears, a compassionate soul. You can help them face their grief. You can help them adjust to that new normal. You can help them begin to heal, but you're not going to fix them. So we're going to go ahead and stop the share and see if there was anything in the chat at all, or does anybody have any questions or comments, examples that they've been through? I'm looking at it. Did we normally totally overwhelm everybody in
Yeah,
these
this
two
is a lot of
modules.
information.
It is a lot, but it's really important. Okay. So let's just, and Connie, please, I'm sure I'll forget something. So let's just talk about the homework, your module task in particular. As we said, it's different. You are going to be given scenarios and you are going to be asked to help that client. What technique would you use? An example? In this module, you're actually going to have two scenarios that you need to do both. They actually were real people that we've had as clients. Names have been changed to protect the innocent. But pay attention, take the time to read the whole thing. Make sure that you are answering the questions. Trying to think of an example. Connie, can you think of something offhand?
No, I'm
So if
tired
it's,
too.
huh?
I'm tired too.
So if it says something like, here's something, like give an example, like what would you say to John about his loss? We're not looking for you to say, you know what, I talked to him about how sad it was, or we're actually looking for sentences. And your module task question will say that, right? That's something that we have to deal with, something, right, Connie? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
some
And
people,
also try to keep in mind that this is your initial meeting with this person. And so when we're first, those first couple sessions with a client, we're really just a sounding board, and all we're trying to do is get information out of them. And so our questions are going to be short and sweet and to the point. There'll be compassion in there. There'll be empathy and understanding, especially for the normalization part of this. But we're not, writing a treatise to, so that's what we're looking for, is just think about what you would say to validate their loss, normalize their loss. Oh boy, I'm tired of loss. and get more information out of them. And so, and that's where the whole nonverbal comes in. You're trying to make your client comfortable enough to share with you. And so this is all about getting information and getting them to talk, because that's what they need to do. Is they just need to get this out of their body. They need to get this pain out of your body. So what your job is to get them to do that, get them to talk.
yeah, and another thing too is to kind of think about, what would you want somebody to say to you if you were the client? Again, there are more techniques than what we have shared with you here. We didn't want to completely overwhelm you and talk about every single one of them. We've shared, and I think, Connie, don't you agree, the ones we've shared are really the ones you kind of use the most?
Yeah.
So the more practice you can get with those, the better you will be. Okay. So I will, tomorrow, I will send the recording out. I'll send both recordings out. It'll be by like 1:30 Eastern time. Sometimes it's earlier, but by 1:30. Does anybody have any questions about the homework?
You can always email us if you think of
Yeah.
something.
Okay.
Oh, and we're switching students, right? So you're gonna get a new one of us to grade your modules.
Yes, yes. Connie, was there something? I don't know.
Yeah, what do you do to broach the topic of referring them to someone else? I think Sandy kind of mentioned that, you can say I don't have the training to be able to address this type of issue. I think you'd really benefit from EMDR training. It's proven to just be an excellent therapy for what you're experiencing right now. And I've got a referral, and, or anything like that, marriage and family counseling, this is something that
Yeah.
I'm not trained in. But I've got a wonderful referral for you if you're interested.
Yeah, and again, like I'll share with you like with that example of the young boy. And young boy, I mean, people get younger as I get older, but I'd say he was probably in his early 20s. But after the group, that first group, I could tell. I mean, he really didn't talk. He was kind of, and his mom talked for him. And I asked them to stay. And his mom wanted to talk as well. And I just said, I am so sorry. That has to be so horrible and traumatic. And this group doesn't really deal with the intensity of that or with traumatic losses. There's a wonderful lady I work with, and that's how I always say it, who it has years of experience doing EMDR therapy. And then I explained what it was. And I said, so EMDR therapy is used when, and I kind of just gave a line or two. That's why it's good to know what it is. He did ask a couple questions about how it's done. So I explained about, kind of retraining your thoughts and the guided imagery. So, it's good to have that information. But I did tell him I'd like you to start that, like you to go a couple of times, but you're definitely welcome into the group. I just need you to get more help than what I can offer you. I have my doctorate, like I said, I have it actually the doctorate is in organization. Hi, Jeter. They're off, the two of them running around.
Oh,
He just jumped down and around. Um, so a lot of people feel like, so organizational psychology is really kind of dealing more with companies. And they say, oh, you're a therapist, and I am the first, but no, I'm not a therapist. I deal with pet loss only, so yeah, I think Connie, was there something I missed or need to see? Or
no, Corin was just asking if last week's assignments were back, and we're still working on those.
yeah, and that brings up actually a good point, and I just want to share that. And I've kind of written to some of you when I've done your homework assignments. So I've had to undergo some health challenges that I'm trying to deal with, and hopefully it'll all be well, and I won't have to deal with as much anymore. But I'm behind, and I know Connie and Ann and Sharon have been trying to pick up the slack a little bit too. So we have been behind in the last week or two. Hopefully we'll be able to catch up. So please bear with us with that as well. Okay. All right. Well, Connie, if you can hang on a little bit, but I hope y'all have a good evening, and we will see you next Sunday. Same time, same back channel, same. Okay. Take care,
Thanks,
y'all.
everybody. Oh.
Hold on one second. Where's my stop thing?
Did you have dinner? Did you have your dinner? Is it, it's raining. Ugh. You know, it's raining when your dog comes in and it's wet.
Post tools.
Did you have some dinner?
Okay, I'm losing my mind.
Right?
Oh, pause, stop recording.